Championship Rack City MTG. I'm going to do something different today. I don't have time to record a whole league in one sitting this afternoon. As you can tell, this league's been pretty mediocre anyway. But hopefully the next match will finish out with the 3-2. There's one specific game that I really wanted to highlight here that I wanted to show as one of the better played games of Magic that you'll see on my channel. I'm not saying that you'll ever see. There's some really good Magic players out there, but at least that you'll see on my channel. Uh, I wish I'd been filming it live so that you could hear some of my thought process on things. But we're going to view the replay here and kind of analyze it together. And let me know if this is the sort of content that you would be interested in seeing as well. I do like making like more analytical content. That's just my type of personality, and it's a lot easier to after the fact really delve into and explain the thought processes on certain options. So let's go ahead and hit play here. My opponent's on this weird. We'll pause it. My opponent is on kind of a different. I wouldn't quite. It's hammer time, but it's kind of like there's a little bit of brewing going on with them. They have a bunch of different like splashes. I think there's at least Esper Splash, and they were running things like Teferi, and apparently a Tidehollow Sculler showed up, and a Blade of the Oni. All sorts of like strange like splashes in either direction. So I really wasn't sure what to expect. But this is the hand that I kept. This was a pretty good hand. One of the hardest points of decisions you'll see for me, and the reason why I kind of dislike the Magic card because I don't think there's really much one way or the other as far as how we're going to be able to beat this card or like okay, so this is the card, of course. It's Esper Sentinel. So we have this crux of a decision point, right? Where we have to decide, do we want to use the removal on it now and lose a card in card advantage, or do we want to give away at least a one turn, if not multiple turn mana advantage? And this is one of the things that's really interesting that like as formats get more and more powerful, that in some ways card advantage slips in favor of mana advantage, and really it can be like that in like lower power formats. Um, that balance of mana advantage versus card advantage. So like it's something like Legacy that has a ton of free cards, card advantage is valued higher, but in formats like Modern specifically, and even like Pioneer down, even though we do have free cards, they don't do powerful enough effects on their own that really warrant the need for like if like we're not you're not seeing any mono black mid range lists out there with like just its goal is to turn one cast grief, um, and like Knight's Whisper to refill their hand and things like that, where they're like going all in on the fact that they have free spells. Like you're not going to see that in modern. Your mana is extremely important, and it's why like Fire Ice is kind of an underrated card. Like being able and in control mirrors, like you'll hear everyone that plays control. First one is like land a 3 mana to fairy. The second one is make your land drop every single turn if you can help it when you're playing that control mirror. But for this situation, I specifically decided that I wanted to play all of my spells on curve. So I went ahead and just took my lumps. I'm not sure why this is still playing. It's supposed to stop here. Okay, I'm hitting pause and it's not pausing. I don't use. Okay, it made me play through their entire turn before pause for whatever reason. But um, I think, can I show you what they revealed? Yeah, I can show you what they revealed. This is one of the weird cards I was talking about. It's the Blade of the Oni. Um, it just seems like one of those where it's like I don't think that I think that's a little bit too cute in one of these decks. But the shell is so powerful that like they probably are winning games even with this type of stuff. They were running Lion Sash too, like just all sorts of weird cards. But as you can see, I think the had I not killed the Esper Sentinel turn one. Shoo, sorry, my cat's like freaking out. She like she fell and got kind of angry about it. Anyway, the if you had not killed the Esper Sentinel turn one, you'd be in this weird crux on turn two where you'd either have to play a one mana spell with the Esper Sentinel still in play, kill the Stoneforge Mystic, and or like like in this specific spot, had they gotten like a good card like Kaldra, you wouldn't want them to be able to just cheat it into play. They're playing around removal here, but hypothetically, like they probably wouldn't have gotten this card. They probably would have gotten Kaldra because I do know that Kaldra was in their deck list. Had we left the Esper Sentinel in play, so you get in this weird crux where it feels really bad to have given them a card and card advantage on the surface to make that play, but being able to interact here, we actually draw a card that like I'll see if it'll let me skip through. It won't. We draw a Haywire Might here, and it just becomes better because we're not really scared of Blade of the Oni at all, and we know that well we have Sudden Edict and Fatal Push next turn, so if we get in this spot where they slam their Kaldra, that we can still like Fatal Push the Stoneforge Mystic, cast a Sudden Edict and get rid of the Kaldra, because the thought process is well maybe this card's like not maybe it was just they had all their good equipment in hand, but Haywire Might taking care of the Urza Saga early just puts us a mana ahead for the game once again, focusing on the mana advantage over the card advantage, especially in a deck that's so low to the ground like the deck we're playing against in these sort of Hammer Time decks. We do have to do a similar thing in this spot, right? Where we Fatal Push the Stoneforge Mystic and we just go ahead and Sudden Edict the Sanctifier in deck. Sudden Edict allows you to get a lot more cute, like maybe try to get them to waste their turn, equipping a Sanctifier in deck with an equipment or something. But in this spot, I don't, I didn't think that there was no way to quickly equip something, and if they wanted to, there's just no world where playing a Shadow Spear and paying 2 mana to equip it the Sanctifier in deck was a good play unless they were very specifically like Shadow Spear and 6 cards or 4 cards in hand, but we already know they have the Blade of Oni, so they're not going to make that play. We just go ahead and do the simple line, Fatal Push the Stoneforge Mystic, and Sudden Edict the Sanctifier in Vec. And pass to their turn, I'll go ahead and let it play through. This is where I'm pretty sure they slam it to Fairy right here and bounce my Urza Saga, which sets me behind a bit. Yeah, it's not the end of the world. We just replay our Urza Saga. I'll keep letting it play here. But as you can see, like we lost our mana and mana advantage from the Haywire Might, but we didn't lose it. It's we're back to like normal draw being on the draw, so it's not crazy for Teferi to bounce our Urza Saga there. I'm almost a fan of waiting as my opponent, go ahead and sticking another threat, and then using Teferi to bounce a token later. But I also because it's like the games should be going long enough where we have to be thinking like, well, that guy's going to get the full value out of Urza Saga anyway. Why don't we go ahead and mitigate some of that value with the Teferi instead of just slowing them down? And that's once again where you get to that point, that crux of decision of resource advantage versus mana advantage. I think that in this case, as the aggro deck, for them, it's more about resource advantage, not mana advantage. They are very low to the ground. They can cast a bunch of spells, so if they can keep our resources lower, I think that gives them the better chance to win. Just a thought to be thinking about. Like it it's not a straightforward instance, and they run a lot of cards like Sigarda's Aid, right? That don't inherently give like this card doesn't really do anything on its own. It's a combo piece with other cards in the deck. It's kind of the same thing with Colossus Hammer, where it's like raw card advantage for them isn't as good as, and resource advantage for them isn't as good as resource advantage for us. We do get in a weird spot here where we just kind of have to stare this Teferi down because we can't cast spells on their turn. Spoiler alert, we're not going to be able to cast spells on their turn for the rest of the game. We just play our land, we line it up so that we get and something that I had forgot even when I was playing is that Sigarda's Age does give Blade of Oni flash, which is pretty cool. And I was kind of wondering before. I was like, wow, I can't believe they didn't, not in the video here, obviously, but I was shocked that they didn't play the Blade of Oni. This is when things get really sticky, and why like this is kind of the sequence of events that like things start going pretty poorly here, right? If you know anything about Hammer Time, this saga is getting hammer next turn, right? Like almost definitely. Um, so we know that's coming, and just so happens that they also have the ability to get another hammer this turn, and they like to do that instead of getting the Urza Saga, which I think was wrong in this spot, because once again they had prioritized the mana advantage and killing me quickly. I think that was not correct. And of course here I just went ahead because I knew there was no possible plays and I can't block anyway, which I had no intention of blocking because this has menace. I just went ahead and went through my turn. So here, not sure why it keeps skipping forward in bundles like this, even though I'm just sitting playing Pauls. Um, Here we decide to float the mana, and we get the Pithing Needle onto Fairy. This is exclusively just because if you don't get the Pithing Needle onto Fairy first, as frustrating as it is, it just generates too much advantage, both mana advantage and resource advantage, right? Because it can bounce the construct back and draw a card, so it can bounce a saga, draw a card. Like it can do multiple things. It's already drawn a card, already bounced, and put our saga back a turn. So this is kind of a weird spot, and it's one. So if you notice, I'm at 4 life here, and this was like one of the first big decision points where like I know that they're not equipping that Colossus Hammer anytime soon. And this one is huge. I'm fairly sure I just Witherbloom command. I decided to destroy the Colossus Hammer instead of the Sigarda's Aid, and it was seems like it probably would have been correct to have done the Sigarda's Aid since the hammer is kind of useless in play in retrospect, but didn't know. I just kind of assumed that decks run Pure Steel Paladin and things like that. I'd rather than be able to play uh, their pieces with flash and auto equip it than I would them have the piece already in play that they can just equip. One, two, three, four, five. So they're pretty far away from equipping it. But it's debatable. Looking back, like now thinking about it, I think I would have taken out the Sigarda's Aid had I put more thought into it. But I also very specifically wanted to kill the Blade of the Oni with the Witherbloom command because I can't kill Sanctifier Invect nor Stoneforge Mystic. So just looking at the way that my hand lined up, I prioritized killing all three creatures in play and shrinking their construct over the Sigarda's Aid. So there's good arguments for both. Um, of course, I had to float the mana here because there's no, even though that last mana doesn't do anything. I just go ahead and I tend to play a little bit tighter when I'm not recording. Like right there, draw the card, make sure that there's nothing else I want to do before I play this out. And this is once again the tricky spot. So this has protection from black and red, right? That's why we didn't kill it on our turn, or we would have. One of the great things about Plague Engineer, which I'm telling you all, if you don't have this magic card, I definitely recommend getting this magic card. It seems that our opponent must have only had one Colossus Hammer in their deck because of all their spicy cards. Because they don't get, I'm at 4 life, they don't get Colossus Hammer here. They end up getting Shadow Spear off this, and they do make the construct token. But this ends up being one of like this is kind of where things get like okay, like I would be dead normally in this situation. I decided to go to 1, and with my draw here, it gets pretty sticky, right? So I know that like it's a tough decision point. I know that I have to play Plague Engineer on human or cleric because if I don't, it doesn't matter even if I block with the construct token because I can't target it with the fatal push, that I'm just dead, right? And Turok's protection from white doesn't mean anything because It has protection from black, and they're the aggressor here. So I know that I'm doing Plague Engineer on um, on human probably because Esper Sentinel's in their deck, and that's what I'm fairly certain that's what I do. Instead of cleric, because I don't think we saw another cleric in their deck, just to get a little added extra value. I'm pretty sure I played Plague Engineer and killed a construct token because once again we did Pithing Needle this Teferi, but we didn't get its static effect out of play. So let's see if I do that. I'm pretty sure I do. Pretty sure I just go Plague Engineer. Yep, and then Fatal push the construct token. So now we're in this weird spot where they have to draw something for this to get through, and we're at one life, right? And we're at one life for a few turns here. And now they Pithing Needle. They decided to name Risk the Hunger Tide. They had seen that the game before, but they also had seen Liliana. And this right here was actually the whole reason why I made the video. So you're at one life. You can do this in your head here. You draw a Witherbloom command. How do you survive from here? I think a lot of people's intuition when you see this exact board state here would be just to automatically scoop. So when you see this board state and you are thinking, okay, well, how do I get out of this situation? It gets kind of a little bit complicated because Giver of Runes now can your give a creature protection from colorless, but something that a lot of Hammer Time players don't realize when they do that, unless they've been playing the deck a little bit, that also removes all equipment, right? So if they give protection from colorless until end of turn, it's just going to be a 1/1, and the construct token can block it and kill it. They might know that, they might not, I'm not sure. It creates this weird decision point, though, where I can only block it with this one creature, and on their turn, they can kill me if I don't remove their creature, right? Or so it seems. So Witherbloom Command has this secret third mode on it, excuse me, fourth mode on it that you don't even really see when the card's just sitting by itself. It says target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So after sitting here for a while, going through all these things, I'm like, man, so do I remove the Scarda's Aid in case they draw a hammer? Do I remove the Shadow Spear so that they don't have trample? Do I and like going through all these things, thinking like, how on earth do I win this game? I finally come to the conclusion. This is after sideboarding, so I have a second Pithing Needle in my main deck. I come to the conclusion that the only way to give myself a chance to win the game is to drain my opponent for 2, get Urza Saga back, and just cast a Turok to block a Giver of Runes if it needs to. And that's exactly what I do. So, it doesn't show all the time in the tank, even though it fast forwards some time. Get the Urza Saga back. I have to fade them, uh, being able to like remove my construct token without a Teferi for 1 turn. If I can do that, or like long enough for me to get my Urza Saga in play, I can somehow maybe claw my way back into the game from that like really horrible position. So our opponent kind of, you can tell they're thinking about what to do. Maybe they play the Tidehollow Sculler to go wide. At this point, they make the choice. I think they make the choice to play around removal and not give this protection from colorless and just get in for 1, which I think is the correct play from our opponent. They do. I think they did know the interaction between colorless and Giver of Runes. So draw land, worst possible draw. Can't really attack. Same situation, right? Where we have to fade like Colossal Hammer, which it doesn't appear. We don't think that they have another Colossal Hammer in their deck because they didn't get it off that Urza Saga. We think that they maybe sideboarded it out. If they, or maybe in their main list they had few. So we're in this spot now where we do have the Saga token. Our opponent starts drawing cards off their draw lands. This is when they decide to just go for it, which I think this is probably the incorrect point to just go for it. If they were going to do that, they should have done so the turn before. And they know that we couldn't have been holding up any sort of removal. We make our Urza Saga construct token. And this is where we know we're like, all right, they played out their hand. We can stabilize now at 2 life. So we make another construct token. We go ahead and get the pithing needle, name Giver of Runes, so that they can't. It keeps fast forwarding even though I hit pause. Sorry. We get the so that they can't do the same thing they just did and give protection to Sanctifier and Vec from Colorless and get in there. Um, and we make the decision that if our opponent had something, they would have played it, and we have to kill them as fast as possible to fade them drawing anything. And I made the decision here that the maximum amount of creatures that I could attack that turn with was two, just because Turok guaranteed gets in there, and then but it doesn't really kill anything if they decided to just swing all out. Like it can't block the Sanctifier and Vec. Um, it could block the Giver of Runes. They're probably not attacking with the Giver of Runes. They're probably giving something protection with Giver of Runes, and it doesn't like they still trample over two if it blocks a Tide Hollow Skeller. So get him there. We leave both construct tokens back, and we really don't want our Plague Engineer to die because if it dies, we probably lose. So opponent here has to once again they're in the same spot where it's sorry my cat's yowling again. I think she hears me talking and wants attention. But we're in this weird decision point where opponent just draws a land. Seems like once again they have nothing. Because once again, like if they had something, they would have played it. And we go here on our turn. We draw the second Plague Engineer. That's kind of just icing on the cake. We just go ahead and name it again. We know that they probably don't have anything. Take out the Sanctifier, and we decide that we're just getting in there. We still don't attack with the Plague Engineer. Opponent scoops. That's the game. We were down 19-1 2 turns ago. You know, life point wise. I didn't seem like it seemed like we were behind on board, and we managed to claw and scrape our way back into the game. If that doesn't tell you that Magic's one of the most beautiful games to play, I don't know what does. And it also tells you do not concede too fast because you can squeeze out some crazy wins if you really play to your outs and know your deck strength and know your opponent's deck strength. That's all I got for you today. I'm not sure whether or not I'll even post this video. I don't want to really interfere with my normal once a week league posting content, but I may post it or I may put it in some interval or like a week. I'm studying for my GRE soon. That's why it's harder for me to sit down and record a whole league in one sitting. I'll kind of play one match and then study for a few hours, play one match, study for a few hours, go to bed. So I've not really sat down and played an entire league straight in a while. But yeah, you all let me know if you like this sort of content as well. And keep racking, keep in this game. Unfortunately, we're still playing this version of the deck where it's a little bit less rack. I've been working on this one for a while. A little bit less racking, especially after sideboard. So we'll say keep Urza's Sagaing for this video or Loaming for this video. Either way, y'all have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next one.